Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I thank you for participating with the RCHCA board meeting. This time I'd like to call the meeting to order. As we usually do, we are going to start the meeting with the Pledge of Allegiance. If you would please rise and join me as we pledge allegiance to the greatest flag of God's green earth. Place your right hand over your heart. Ready to begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Please take your seats. Lucy, Madam Clerk, would you please conduct a roll call?
Definitely. When I call your jurisdiction, please state your name. City of Corona. City of Hemet.
Jackie Peterson.
Lake Elsinore.
Steve Manos.
Menifee. Moreno Valley.
Shaylin Bernard.
Murrieta. Paris.
Michael Harris.
Murrieta, was that somebody?
Well, Lisa DeForest is on her way up. She's in the elevator right now, so she'll be here in a second. But
Thank you. City of Riverside.
Steve Hemingway.
Temecula. James
Stewart.
Wildomar. County of Riverside, District 5.
Maybe we wanted to visit you.
Wildamar's here too.
Billy
So-
Catalano.
They just showed up.
Joseph Larvito from Wildomar and Miss Lisa DeForest from Murrieta. That
Yes.
is roll call, and we do have one.
I suggest we work them to the Pledge of Allegiance on their own. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. All right, this moves us on to public comments. This time, members of the public can address the board regarding any item within the subject matter jurisdiction of the board that are not separately listed on this agenda. Members of the public will have an opportunity to speak on agendized items at the time the item is called for discussion. No action may be taken on items not listed on the agenda unless authorized by law. Whenever possible, lengthy testimony should be presented to the board in a way that is only pertinent and points should be presented to the board in writing, and only pertinent points should be presented orally. Lucy, do we have any public comments?
I have no requests.
No requests to speak. Excellent. We're gonna move on to consent and policy calendar. All items listed under the consent calendar are considered to be routine and may be enacted in one motion. Prior to the motion to be considered by any board member, any public comments on any of the consent items will be heard. If a member of the board requests a specific item to be pulled for discussion from the consent calendar, we will have that discussion and then vote on the consent calendar as a whole to avoid multiple votes. Lucy, do we have any members of the public who wish to speak on the consent calendar?
I have no requests.
No requests to speak. Do we have any members of the board that wish to speak in any of those items and pull any items? Hearing none, can I get a motion second to approve the consent calendar?
Harris moves.
I'll second it.
No. Go for it.
All right, Jackie beat you in a second. Lucy, would you please conduct the roll call vote?
We have a motion by Paris and a second by Hammett. City of Corona. Hammett.
Yes.
Lake Elsinore.
Yes.
Menifee. Moreno Valley.
Yes.
Murrieta.
Yes.
Paris.
Yes.
Riverside.
Yes.
Temecula.
Yes.
Wildomar.
Yes.
County District 5. That concludes the voting on this item, and it passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. This takes us to reports and discussions. Members of the public will have an opportunity to speak on the agenda items once that item is called for discussion. We're going to start off with item 6A. It is a presentation for RCHCA's Brian Choma regarding the SKR Habitat Conservation Plan. Brian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mayor Monis, Chairman, and thank you guys for being here today. I know many of your cities may be under threat of fire, and we appreciate you attending today. It's an important topic. It's the actually to authorize staff to renew the Stevens Kangaroo Rat Habitat Conservation Plan. If not renewed, the plan will expire in May of 2026. We are under a little bit of a shortened deadline because if we need to have the application permit within U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and CDFW's organization within 6 months of permit expiration. That way, if they take longer or a year or 2 years or 5 years to renew that application, we can continue to work under our current permit conditions and development continue unabated within the plan area. So just to renew, it was a 30-year permit. Again, it expires in May of 2026. And again, if we get it in with the application in within 6 months of expiration, then everything continues as normal. But at the May meeting, we had talked about other options besides renewing, and the board directed us to look into whether we should merge the RCHCA with the Western Riverside MSHCP. And so we looked into it with legal staff. We looked in had informal talks with the RCA. We looked into it as much as we could. We came up with a variety of things that would need to be identified. Some of those things would still be unknown until you went down that road. And we'll get into that in a little bit more detail in the presentation. But basically, at this point, we think it would be impractical to merge both plans for a variety of reasons, as including the merging of the two HCPs would alter land boundaries, obviously, terms and conditions of both of those plans, financing, which would result in major amendments to both plans, necessitating a new environmental impact report and encounter new EIR, in other words. This would in turn basically expose both plans to renewed legal challenges, things that have been fought and basically buried at this point, maybe be open. It would expose us to having new conditions imposed upon us by U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, CDFW, the regulatory community. All of the land would need to be transferred to the RCHCA owns, including easements and contracts. We have to dissolve the agency, dissolve the mitigation fee. Without the mitigation fee, there would be technically no additional funding to achieve the goals of recovery or the objectives of the land management the RCHCA has. So therefore, the MSHCP fee would also need to be altered to accommodate those increased costs. And then the RCA would have to agree to assume all the RCHCA's management and monitoring obligations going forward. So that being said, we did look into it and like to go into a little bit more detail on each of those topics as we talk about the legal issues. We'll go back first. There. RCH Legal Counsel has looked into it and determined that these changes, there was a question whether this is a major amendment to the plans or if these can be a minor amendment, simple amendments that the boards can each authorize without going into a whole SQL analysis and a whole major amendment process. But legal has determined that it would be a major amendment to both plans. And again, as I said earlier, it would require a new environmental impact report. Those can take years to resolve, and then the subsequent challenges that we anticipate would happen with those. That again is unknown because we don't know what it would actually cost. We know it would have to be done, but we don't know at what cost. We don't know how many legal challenges there would be, or again, at what cost. And so the reason it would have to be a major amendment, you can see there's boundary changes, funding requirements, management monitoring, everything we just discussed a moment ago. The other unknown is that any merger or any major challenge to the HCP would require review and approval by the wildlife agencies, which could result in additional conditions and mitigation requirements. It could be something as simple as, well, now the STRHCP, which has really no species objectives, there's no density requirements or occupancy requirements. The MSHCP has very specific requirements. Those requirements, for instance, are that 5 to 10 individuals have to be found per hectare on 33% of the conserved land. That's a very high hurdle to overcome. And put that in place in all of our RCHCA property and all the RCHCA reserves would be a substantial burden for this agency, for any agency to achieve. And so those are the types of things that would have to be negotiated. But it could be something simple. Yeah, you're going to roll into the MSHCP, we're going to have you meet the same objectives, which would be difficult for us to achieve. And then with informal talks with the RCA board, they recently authorized their staff to seek a study that potentially would result in a range-wide criteria refinement that would alter land boundaries, perhaps funding requirements, that kind of thing, which may result in an EIR on their end. It potentially would result in major changes to the MSHCP. Putting the SDRHCP into that mix at the same time would be a severe complication of factors that they're probably not looking forward to helping resolve at this point. They got a lot on their plate trying to fix a lot of the stuff that has gone wrong over the years. And so that being said, next slide, we do have some idea of what the cons are. And again, again, move back to legal challenges, the fee structure. We know that the fees would have to be altered. We know that would,
I gotta interrupt.
oh, sure.
Are we, is the quorum including the folks on screen?
Yes, sir.
Because it looks like they all vacated their room over there.
Well, when we do a roll call vote for the item, hopefully we'll be back to respond.
Hopefully they have to evacuate for some reason.
Yeah.
Right, that's what I was thinking
Sure, what's
too.
going on? Okay,
Okay. Well,
I mean, I think we can make a phone call, huh?
Yeah, we have a
They-
quorum.
they're wrong. They're part of the quorum, I mean, how did they vote? They ran out.
although they checked in,
I got it.
When they checked in,
Hey,
can't they,
They
can't
had
they?
a skirt out there too, they could just walk.
Yeah, it's a little suspicious.
Okay. False alarm.
Looks like they're going back in.
You guys okay out there?
Yep, we're good.
Okay, we just saw you run out of the room, we thought something happened.
Yeah, I know. It was a fire drill.
Oh.
Sorry about that.
no, I'm glad you called that, I wasn't paying attention to that.
I just have to look at it.
We didn't know if we had a quorum or not after you guys all left, so. we-
Yeah, no, we're here.
Thank you. Just to, again, reiterate, we did identify some unknowns. We're now looking at some of the cons of merging, with the MSHCP. Again, those cons are major cons. We know there are legal issues, domain either the, HCP is subject to new legal challenges. The fee structure right now, the STR HCP fee, is set on a per acre basis. The MSHCP, is on a per unit basis or on a per square foot basis. MSHCP does not cover STR take within the overall Western Riverside MSHCP area. You can think of it like a donut hole within the donut. So their fee would have to be, a new fee, nexus fee study would have to be conducted in order to accommodate the land mass that's now the donut hole within the MSHCP. Next slide. Back. And final three cons, merging the HCPs again would require a nexus study, talked about that already. Fee increase is unknown until the study is completed. We don't know how much, if you merge the plans, we don't know how much it's gonna go up. We anticipate it would go up though. Management monitoring, again, we talked about this just briefly in the summary. Merging of the HCPs would result in higher levels of STR species objectives, which we currently are not operating under, and currently required by the STR HCP. Now would result in costly and expensive land management monitoring obligations on behalf of whoever took over both plans. The STR recovery efforts currently underway. If we went down this road and merged them, it would throw a little bit of an uncertainty into that. Would they be able to carry on the monitoring, the range-wide monitoring program? Would they be able to carry on the management that has shown to increase higher levels of occupancy throughout the range of the SKR? So the service and the department, the state, would be a little uncomfortable with the merging at this time. And so the only pros that we could really identify, and we are open to discussion if anybody knows anything else, is really combining the two HCPs would result in a single governing structure. Then it simplifies your governing structure. You have one board, one plan. But we don't know if that, and this is for you guys to decide, whether that overrides all the cons and the unknowns. Staff is recommending, to authorize us to coordinate with U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife on updating and amending, if necessary, the Stevens Kangaroo Habitat Conservation Plan. And that we would like to be authorized to staff to complete and submit the federal and state Habitat Conservation Plan permit renewal applications. But at this time, I'll be happy to take any questions and answer them the best that I can.
Thank you, Brian. Do we have any members of the public, which wish to comment on this item first off? Do we have any board members that have any questions or comments on this item?
Yes.
Jump in.
All right, yeah, so Joseph Morbido here. Yeah, I had asked for this mostly because it, from an outsider's perspective, it seems that the two should be together. So it was good to have it explained that because of our own human devices, we've made this so complicated that it's not a good idea. So it might be one of those things that as the board turns over membership 3, 4, 5 years, whatever, to bring this back on so that that way it would answer the question that the next group of people would have, like, hey, why aren't they together? And it's because it's too many entanglements to get through based on the way California law is. So that's where I'm at. I don't want to cause undue work or stress for either organization. And if things are working, then I appreciate the report on how that all works together. So that's all.
Just to be clear, both agencies agree that the plan will be merged at some point in the future. Again, in informal discussions, it would be nice for the acquisition for the MSHCP to be completed and they move into management monitoring phase. It would be much simpler if the STR was recovered and we're also in the management monitoring phase as we are now. And once it's recovered, it's a little less of a headache to merge those when both agencies are in the same pace and perhaps one of those species is fully recovered. And so not to say that it shouldn't happen, it should happen at some point in the future, but I don't think we would recommend moving forward with that kind of major amendment to those plans now.
Right, and you're probably aware that, because we were just hearing if you're on, I think either RCTC and or RCA about the crotches bumblebee and what that's doing for the MSHCP anyway, so, you know, one headache at a time.
Yes, sir.
Obviously, the cons outweigh the pros. I do not support this concept at all. As a city, as a mayor, development in my city, there are so much struggles going on with RCA and the leaps and bounds that we have to take with RCA. I'm very thrilled that we have separate agencies that are taking care of this cute little critter. It's $1 million. What's our budget? Point some million? 1.7. I totally support this, and if no one has no more comments, I'd like to make a motion that we support staff's recommendation.
I'll second it, and I'll just add that as a mayor of a city, I get lots of complaints about the MSHCP and restrictions and moving goalposts, quite frankly. I think when it relates to development, I get zero complaints or comments about RCHCA. They pay their fee and they move on, and that's the way it was promised for both agencies once upon a time. So unless there's any other comments by board members, either online or here, it's just the three of them that are, okay, so it's just the three of you guys that are online. So any other questions here in the boardroom? Hearing none, we got a motion, we have a second.
Could you clarify the motion though? I wasn't quite catching that.
My motion is to approve staff's recommendation, what's on the screen.
So we got the authorized staff to coordinate with the United States Fish and Wildlife Service and the California Department of Fish and Wildlife Fund, updating and amending if necessary the Stevens Kangaroo Rat Habitat Conservation Plan. And number 2 is authorized staff to complete and submit the federal and state habitat conservation plan permit renewal applications.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Roll call.
Peter Corona. Hammett,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Menifee, Moreno Valley,
Yes.
Murrieta,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Riverside,
Yes.
Temecula,
Yes.
Wildomar,
Yes.
County of Riverside. That concludes the voting on this item and it passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. We're going to move on to item 6B. Item 6B is a presentation by RCHCA's Brianna Fisher with a fiscal year 2023, 2024. It's financial analysis. Ms. Fisher, you have the floor. Thank you.
So our fiscal year ended June 30th, so I just wanted to provide an annual overview of our finances, how to stand, and just to note that our accounting is still closing the books, so these numbers are not final, so they close it in a couple weeks. So RCHC operates on 2 primary budget components: the general fund revenues and the Lake Matthews reserve operations. The general fund revenues come from Stevens Kangaroo Rat mitigation fees, interest, and contracts. So for fiscal year 23-24, the general fund revenues were $1.46 million, while expenditures totaled $1.36 million. Lake Matthews Reserve operations are sustained by our endowment funds and contracts, supporting land management, monitoring activities, and reserve staff, salaries and benefits. So Lake Matthews Reserve, revenues, total $505,000, and expenditures total $375,000. So overall, the total agency revenue took in $2.2 million, which was a 12% increase from our projections. Total agency expenditures equaled $1.74 million, so a little less than 1% over our projections. And expenditures did increase by about 13% compared to last fiscal year. So just looking at the total agency revenue breakdown, the agency again collected $2.2 million in total revenue. 44% of that came from interest, 35% came from SDR mitigation fees, 21% was derived from grants and contractual agreements. The endowment interest and grant funding did help bolster our financial stability, with grant income covering a significant portion of staff salaries and benefits. Looking at the total agency expenditures for 23-24, they totaled $1.74 million. As stated, expenses did rise by about 13% over the previous fiscal year, primarily due to increased activity and operational costs. The majority of costs were related to staff salaries and benefits, so 48%. Overhead was 21%, consulting labor was 14%. Because the agency has been instrumental in obtaining grant funds to support our program activities, staff salaries and benefits, the mitigation fee revenue and grant income did exceed expenditures this past fiscal year, and therefore no funds need to be drawn down from either the RCHCA General Fund Reserve or the Lake Matthews Endowment Fund, which is a first in recallable history of our agency, at least in the last decade.
Good job.
Okay. Skip one. Okay. At last, I thought it'd be a good exercise to look at a 10-year review of our agency's SDR mitigation fee collections. You can see from 2014 to 2015, mitigation fee revenue was pretty consistent, and then it rose between 2017 and 2019. Then we see a sharp decrease in 2020, obviously due to COVID. Yet surprisingly, in 21-22, those were two of our highest grossing years within the 10-year period. However, 2023 was our lowest year, not only in the 10-year period, but in its fourth lowest mitigation fee revenue collected in the agency's history. And one of those was during the last recession. So, in 2024, mitigation fee collections did return to about average, what we do expect with inflation. So looking at this 10-year review, we can see that mitigation fee revenue is highly unpredictable as development is, which is why the agency has been so instrumental in seeking other sources of revenue, including our contract agreements and grant funding to support our program activities and staff salaries and benefits. So through our proactive revenue approaches, the agency's fiscal health has remained sustainable thus far. However, while staff continue to seek additional revenue sources, a long-term evaluation of our mitigation fee revenues is recommended to ensure the agency's long-term fiscal stability. That's my report.
Thank you
I'll
so
have to
much.
answer any questions.
Excellent. Do we have any written requests from the public to speak on this item? Okay, so we're gonna take it to the board. Do any of the board members have question, comments?
How many grants did you get this past year?
We got two.
Two.
Yeah, and there's supported, we got a Bureau of Land Management grant for almost $1 million to support fuel reduction and management activities. And then we also got a $250,000 grant from the Bureau of Land Management to support our range-wide management monitoring plan.
Excellent. Good job.
The one grant offsets about 400 hours for each of this staff.
Each.
So you can see the grants that each of the all the development within the member agencies appeared to $763,000. That's what we basically cost you guys. All the other funding came through the grants and contract work. Yeah, so which a really good job.
Quick question, Mr. Chair, can you go back to the slides? How are some of these cities don't pay anything? This is all based on the new development?
So Corona pretty much is developed out, how many?
I didn't realize this was all based on new development. I thought it was
This is historical 10-year average on it, but Corona is a little bit, Corona is a little bit different. They have 60 acres within the plan area. It's just this one mine. The way the boundaries drawn is it's just one mine. So historically, they've never contributed. And in 2020, they had a expansion of that mine or whatever, and they paid us the fees for the entire project. The county is a little bit different. I'm not sure what's going on at the county, but it has tapered off substantially to its lowest point ever that we've seen. Hammett is a little bit different. They have contributed, and then I think they had personnel changes, and then we've contacted them, and then they remitted some, and then there's some personnel changes. And so we're working with each of the cities and the county to try to basically make sure everybody's on the same page. Thank you.
Okay. I just have to say that this particular organization, since I've been involved, has been one of the most fiscally responsible organizations that I've ever seen operate. It doesn't really operate like a government agency, honestly, but thank you for that and continuance in that. Unless there's any other comments, we're gonna move on. This is receive and file, so we're gonna move on to item 6C. Item 6C is an update by RCHCA Brian Shomo regarding a nexus fee study for the SKR Habitat Conservation Plan. Shomo.
So continuing the story of the fees and whatnot, we've prided ourselves in being fiscally responsible for the last 30 years. It was something that set with Carolyn Luna back in the day, and Kirk Wilson continuing to have that. We stay in our lane and keep our mission focused. And we do what we absolutely need to run in a very efficient capacity. That being said, the ordinance 663, when it was first adopted in 1988, was $1,950 per acre. Those folks paid substantially more to keep them without inflation when they originally approved this plan. And so that was used to basically acquire the land, all the land that went into the SRHCP. And to get into a long story short, our land and everything within it was supposed to be turned over to the Bureau of Land Management for long-term management. For a variety of reasons, that deal fell through. RCHCA got basically stuck holding the bag of all of the land and needed to manage it at that point. Approximately 28 years ago, ordinance 663 was amended to $500 an acre. Since there's no land acquisition was necessary at that point, there was no fee study conducted at that time, though, to identify whether that was sufficient in order to manage and monitor this land in perpetuity, again, because the BLM was supposed to take it all. There was no CPI adjustment to that fee. And so for the last 28 years, we haven't raised that on any of the member agencies, which we've, I mean, to be quite honest, taken some pride into doing that. We've been very creative, as Rihanna said, seeking out grant funding, seeking out contracting our services out, trying to keep costs down for our developers within our communities. At this point, though, with the SKR-HCP renewal, those regulatory agencies are asking us to prove that we have funding assurance for the next term. And so we are basically being required to conduct a nexus fee study. There may be additional costs, maybe the fee needs to be adjusted. I assume it probably will be. But that being said, we have to authorize the nexus fee study in order to renew the HCP, just to prove that we are fiscally sustainable and that we can meet our future conservation goals. And so, next slide. We are asking the board at this time to authorize staff to solicit proposals for conducting a nexus fee study and develop a comprehensive update to the Stevens Kangaroo Rat mitigation fee. We're asking you to authorize the chair of or the general manager pursuant to legal counsel review to finalize and execute the agreement on behalf of the RCHCA, and it's not to exceed $75,000. Any questions? I'd be happy.
Thank you, sir. Do we have any requests to speak from the public or any requests to speak from the public at this time?
I have no requests.
Okay, any board members, questions? Now is the time. All right, hearing none, we are going to accept a motion, the recommendation or requested action by staff. Authorize staff to solicit proposals for conducting a nexus fee study and develop a comprehensive update to the Stevens Kangaroo Rat mitigation fee and schedule. And secondarily, to authorize the chair general manager pursuant to legal counsel review, finalize and execute the agreement on behalf of RCHCA not to exceed $75,000. Do we have that motion?
Paris moves.
Got a motion from Paris. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
We have a second. Any discussion on the motion? Roll call vote.
City of Corona? Emmett,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore,
Yes.
Menifee, Moreno Valley,
Yes.
Murrieta,
Yes.
Paris,
Yes.
Riverside,
Yes.
Temecula,
Yes.
Wildemar,
Yes.
County of Riverside. That concludes the voting on this item and it passes unanimously.
Thank you very much. All right, that concludes that item, and we're gonna move along to item 6D. Item 6D is an update by RCHCA's Colin Stratz regarding the SKR reserve management and monitoring efforts.
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, and thank you all for being here. For those who don't know me, my name is Colin Stratz, and I assumed the position of Natural Resource Manager with RCHA in February of 2024. Today, I'm going to be providing a brief update on management highlights that occurred over the last quarter, as well as recent equipment acquisitions. Additionally, I'll provide an overview of upcoming management activities for the fall. So first off, we'll start with the Eagle Fire update. On July 21st, 2024, at approximately 2:40 p.m., the Eagle Fire sparked just south of the intersection of Eagle Canyon Road and Calico Road. The fire quickly grew and moved eastward onto the canyon, onto RCHCA owned property, resulting in the burning of about 1,700 acres, of which about 1,400 acres were RCHA owned property parcels. At approximately 8:10 on July 21st, forward progression of the fire stopped. However, suppression and cleanup efforts continued through the next day. Once it was deemed safe to enter, our staff, including myself, ventured onto the property and began assessing the impacts of the property, and began kind of collecting aerial imagery and mapping dozer line activity and fire suppression efforts. So fire suppression efforts on RCH's lands consisted of our fire retardant drops, dozer lines, hand lines, and then thereafter follow-up mop-up operations. Retardant drops and dozer line activity was concentrated primarily near private property parcels located just south of the intersection of Calico Road and Sierra Avenue to protect life and property. The most significant of the impacts caused by the fire was unfortunately due or attributed to the dozer line activity. These dozer lines, such as those represented in this slide, were scraped to minerals soil to prevent fire progression. While some dozer lines were established on existing roads, there are several areas where dozer operators established lines within mature sage scrub, and then restoration efforts will be necessary to recover those locations. In the short term, erosion control will be needed to prevent excess soil erosion in sloped areas. Following soil erosion control, the areas will need to be monitored for invasive weeds and restored through a combination of seeding and container stock insulation and irrigation. While the fire was significant, due to the speed at which it burned, the areas not impacted by dozer activity should recover well from existing seed banks and sage scrub root systems, which are expected to resprout. However, weed control will be required in these areas to prevent tight conversion from sage scrub into an annual grassland. Moving on to equipment updates. Some of these equipment updates were discussed during the previous board meeting. However, I wanted to highlight one new major addition to our fleet, which is the item on the left-hand side, the Kubota Kubota M5111 enclosed cab tractor. We at the RCHA and myself primarily, I think, are excited to have this added to our kind of tool belt. The tractor's increased horsepower capabilities will allow for a wide variety of implement attachments, including the 12-foot wide rotary mower, which is on the right-hand side of that slide. The enclosed cab tractor will also allow for increased employee safety when applying herbicide, working in poor air quality or dust conditions, and during high temperatures. I'd like to highlight that these equipment acquisitions, all three of them represented on the slide, would not have been possible without the support of federal financial assistance from the Bureau of Land Management through the BLM California Fuels Management and Community Fire Assistance Program. We at the RCHA are grateful for the opportunity to utilize these tools, as well as the opportunity to obtain some of these funds in order to purchase and use them for our management efforts. Next, I would like to highlight our habitat management activities that our team has been focused on since the last board meeting. And I'll start with our rare plant habitat enhancement project. Right. RCHCA have identified locations where historic populations of rare plants have been observed / recorded within the Lake Matthews Estelle Mountain Reserve. And proceeded to delineate a 30-meter diameter polygon around the center point of these observation points. All the species on the slide are either threatened or endangered, included as covered species under the multi-species habitat conservation plan. Borders of the polygons were marked with 6 T-posts to allow staff to easily revisit the polygons and conduct vegetation maintenance and monitoring throughout the growing season. We're expecting to begin vegetation vegetation maintenance efforts this upcoming fall and leading into the winter operations. And this project will occur over the next several years so that we can document occurrence as well as increases in population size of some of these rare and threatened plants. Thus far, we've established a total of 6 rare plant polygons. As this project progresses, we're expecting to expand that project so we can increase populations of other rare plant species that are not necessarily identified on this slide.
Question, Mr. Chair. That one plant species, whatever,
Yeah.
next to that penny.
That one's Perry's coryzanthe, or excuse me, that one actually is Dodecahema leptoceras. It's a slender horned spine flower species that tends to be about the size of a penny.
So that's it, I mean, it does not grow.
In some cases, it can grow to the size of maybe $50.
It's unimpressive.
Typically,
I mean, it looks like it's got some beautiful colors and stuff, but I mean, my God, the average person is stepping all over that one.
typically penny sized, yes, fairly innocuous plants that you wouldn't normally be thinking about. But in any type of development case, whenever you have to do land kind of surveys or anything, these are typically some of the plants that they'll be looking for. And if you find them on your property, unfortunately, typically have to mitigate for them.
Wow.
Yeah, I get it. It's kind of crazy, but it can range from small to big and everything in between.
Thank you.
Of course. So let's see. This season, in addition to the Eagle Fire, we also had another fire at Lake Matthews or within the Lake Matthews Reserve, informally or known as the Tin Mine Road Fire. Fortunately, this fire was much smaller and less impactful than the Eagle Fire. But just a brief update on that fire activity. On June 20th, so the day before the Eagle Fire, actually, at approximately 5:30 p.m., a fire sparked adjacent to Tin Mine Road, which was quickly contained by CAL FIRE after burning approximately 150 acres. Once the area was safe to enter again, our staff entered the area. We proceeded to document fire activity, map the border of the fire, as well as document extended damages, including fire retardant drops and some limited dozer line activity. Again, this area was less impactful, much smaller burn scar. Dozer line activity on that map displayed in the slide is limited just to the 2 yellow lines. And then as far as remediation efforts, our team is going to be recontouring some of those berms to kind of get rid of any type of burned areas, or recontouring the dozer lines themselves to get rid of the berms, and then monitoring the area for any type of noxious weed invasions. So next on the list is our Stevens Kangaroo Rat range-wide monitoring, which is currently underway. And thus far, tracking results are promising. To date, RCHCA staff have completed monitoring at the Lake Matthews Estelle Mountain Reserve and the San Jacinto Wildlife Area Potrero unit. At the Lake Matthews Reserve, out of the 11 trapping grids, SKR was documented at a total of 9 of the 11. Within the Potrero unit, 7 grids were established and SKR was fined at 7 grids. Trapping operations will continue at the remaining locations between now and the end of October. Personally, this for me has been an exciting experience to be part of, interact with animals that we're working to conserve and uplift habitat conditions for. I'm really looking forward to the rest of our monitoring season and to be able to kind of interact and see the fruits of our labor essentially.
So what was going on in the bottom picture? You're rubbing his tummy?
I was kind of pushing his foot.
I don't know what he was doing.
Unfortunately, you have to get a little personal with your SDR in order to identify their sex. And
But I mean, that's a typical position of my little chihuahua. Rubbing her tummy. I'm thinking, wow, you guys have that kind of a relationship.
It's almost the same, you see it closes its eyes.
Yeah,
It kinda
it's
goes-
I I took him out to dinner afterwards.
Oh, look, but I mean, the picture poses that they're not,
They're not frisky.
they're not trying to
Right, they're not.
get away from you. I mean,
Yeah.
they're allowing you to be with them. That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean,
If you put them down, they just stare at you, okay?
I think that picture above is a perfect example of that too. It might be the same individual of, taking the initial sex information, getting our weight and whatnot, and then just placing him on the ground. That little guy proceeded to stay there for a solid 30 seconds to a minute and was able to capture.
Well, you got his, you got a back rubber, a tummy rubber.
Come back for a second.
Thank you.
Of course. The last project I would like to highlight today is an undercrossing pipe assessment that our team recently conducted. Just as a brief background, when Calco Road was constructed, water conveyance pipes were installed at various locations along the road to maintain hydrologic connectivity from the south side of the road to Lake Matthews to the lake. These pipes were may also unintentionally function as a wildlife corridor for animals, small animals such as SKR. However, we're a little unknown on that one at the moment. Currently, there is interest from the county and state to revisit the Calco Road expansion project. Although the status of the Calco Road expansion project is still pending, if the project is approved, the proposed mitigation measure to offset impacts caused by the road expansion is to install additional wildlife crossing pipes underneath the road to maintain hydrologic connectivity to the lake, as well as to function as a wildlife corridor between the south side of the lake and between the south side of Calco to the north side of Calco. And really in an effort to inform future decisions, RCHCA staff began to map the locations of all intercrossing pipes that exist within the reserve, as well as document the conditions of the pipe to determine if they're clogged and if regular maintenance would be required for long term. Based on our initial findings, the vast majority of the pipes surveyed, approximately 55, I believe of the 90, are either partially or fully obstructed, leaving one to believe that regular pipe maintenance may be necessary to ensure that they are functioning correctly. For our next step, our staff plan to install wildlife cameras at various undercrossing pipes to document presence/absence of any animal activity, so we can record or determine if they are actually functioning as wildlife corridors. So I'm looking forward to the next quarter. Our safety plans to focus on the following tasks. SKR range-wide monitoring is scheduled to continue through October, with the next round of monitoring locations scheduled for Lake Henshaw/Warner Springs during the week of September 23rd. With the bird nesting season being fully completed at this point, woody invasive removals are scheduled to begin. RCHC staff have been recording inventory points of the locations of noxious weed populations within the reserve, such as tree of heaven, salt cedar, and tree tobacco, just to name a few. We're hoping to get involved with our wildlife camera installation. So wildlife cameras will be installed not only within wild undercrossing pipes, but at our burrowing owl artificial mounds to document any type of overwintering activity, and so we can track their population into next year. Equipment calibration and familiarization with obtaining some of these new tractors, as well as herbicide applicators, and even our rotary mower. There's a lot of, a learning curve that comes with adding those to our fleet and getting our staff familiar with operating the equipment, as well as calibrating our herbicide, so that we're not necessarily exceeding any type of application limits. And then lastly, we plan to keep an eye on weather activity and to be prepared for the first rains, so we can be able to apply some pre-emergent herbicides in strategic locations, basically to prevent the germination of noxious weeds, as well as our potential spread of noxious weeds within the reserve.
Thanks.
Yeah, I was gonna ask the same question.
You know, I gotta be honest with you, this designer on PowerPoint came up with this, designer image. I kind of just rolled with it. So the dinosaur's probably not the most appropriate. Aside from the fact that maybe some of the herbicides require fossil fuels in order to make them, I guess that's maybe the connection.
Stretch.
And then lastly, with that, I want to thank you all for the opportunity to present with you today. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, sir. We're gonna start off with public comments. Do we have any requests to speak? No requests. All right, board members. Great presentation.
Thank you.
That's all.
give Colin and Matt Singer, we got a really nice note from Metropolitan Water District. Matt Singer, one of our weekend patrol, helped save one of their buildings and many of their trucks by extinguishing a flare up that was adjacent to their building. And so MWD thanked the RCHCA for Matt's help in extinguishing that. And Colin, I was in Pennsylvania at the time his fires broke out, and Colin did an excellent job of being a resource advisor to CAL FIRE to avoid those sensitive SKR areas, was particularly to dozers. So a really great job there. Really will help the reserve recover much more quickly. And what he didn't probably say, probably a little bit early to say, but I will say, the range-wide monitoring survey looks better this year than last. So it's the trend line that we've been waiting for. Maybe took a little bit of dip last year, but still pretty good. I think it's going to be a little higher this year. So the trend line is going upwards.
Can you guys talk a little bit about, you know, the difference between like a prescribed fire and one that's unplanned and what not? I mean, obviously you got fire lines and breaks that are, you know, essentially plowed through the conservation area and whatnot. And I'm just trying to wrap my head around, we use the prescribed fire method, you know, you don't have that, and why? How does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, earlier this year, we were preparing for prescribed fire on the north side of the Lake Matthews, and within that area, we had run area about 293 acres, and with that, just establishing our burn lines, our hand lines to kind of delineate our border and keep the fire activity contained. And with those prescribed fire events too, we'll usually have, you know, numerous staff members located in different locations, CAL FIRE, our staff, ready to respond to any type of unusual activity, and lots of resources as far as different type of equipment to put out fires. So everything's on hand, ready to go. It's kind of a very structured organization. Plans are discussed each morning, as well as mop-up operations are anticipated in the afternoons once we kind of wrap up everything.
Probably weather plays a factor too.
It's under, they used to be called control burns, right? Until one of them got out of control. But they used to be called, they're very controlled, as he was saying, structured. You know, we don't light it until a certain point of ignition is reached, and it has to be a really high point of ignition. So it doesn't set off multiple little sparks and fires and stuff like that. There's a lot of resources there, and then it's shut down before that point of ignition reaches a low point. So it's really low, and then they can burn at that point. So typically we only burn from say 9 o'clock till noon, and then it's shut down and mopped up. So it's ideally it's under controlled conditions as compared to a wildfire, which happens randomly, usually the hottest time of the year, and then point of ignition through the roof, you know. So yeah, that's really that's interesting. Yeah,
I mean, we've been doing a lot of fire lately. So.
Right, and you know, again, because controlled and nothing's really ever controlled when you're doing it.
Yes, sir. So it's always an opportunity to learn.
Yeah.
Okay, if there's no other questions or comments, this is a receive and file. We're going to move on to item 6E. Item 6E will be a presentation by RCHCA's. Is it Rihanna or what? Rihanna? Okay, Rihanna. I'm sorry. Rihanna Fisher regarding the request of endowment funds for Sycamore Canyon. Be on the floor, please.
Appreciate it. So Sycamore Canyon, as you may or may not know, is one of our 8 core reserves, located in the city of Riverside. It expands about 1,500 acres of protected space. So Sycamore Canyon does have a non-wasting endowment with us, available to the reserve to support SKR management and monitoring related activities. Currently the fund balance is approximately $1.17 million, with $175,000 available for use. So the City Parks, Sycamore Canyon's reserve manager, Ryan Gibson, submitted a request for $121,000 from the non-wasting endowment to fund the purchase of equipment needed for habitat management. One being a tractor, as Colin was explaining, we got our tractor, the tractor can be used for various land management activities. It's very helpful to the reserve. So the primary use of the funds will be to purchase the equipment used to repair trails and eradicate invasive non-native weeds through spraying, which will improve the habitat for not only SKR, but all the other native species on the reserve. So RCHCA has reviewed this request, so we do view it as an appropriate use of endowment funds. So staff would like to recommend to the board's approval of the endowment fund, an amount of $121,486.
Great, thank you. All right, so we're going to open it up to public comments and testimony. Are there any requests from the public to speak on this?
I have no requests.
We have no requests. That moves us forward to any board member comments or questions.
I have a comment. I see two of the quotes have expired.
Yes, so we forgot to submit the request to us a while ago, and it took him quite a bit to get the quotes. So what we basically did was add 10% to the amount of the quote, just in case it went up when he produced another quote, but he is in the process of doing that.
Okay.
So we wanted some leverage there.
Okay, cause a lot of times for projects, they'll put in that 10% over and above, but if you don't have an initial cost that's firm, you don't know what that 10% will be.
We don't really think it'll go much past that, because you do get the quotes for the tractors as well as the implements, I believe. But if there are any changes, we'll see back to the board.
Yeah, if it wouldn't exceed that before we
Yeah.
come back to you. So you're approving the 121,486.35 cents.
Okay.
Isn't the market softening a little bit for that type of equipment?
We got a heck of a deal on that tractor.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah, so I don't know if you're, that's the same level of tractor or whatnot, but we got it seemed to be softer than when we initially looked at it, so that's what it sounds like.
We're looking at a couple different types of equipment than what we've used in our past, and one of them is the Kubota UTV that has all these upgraded attachments to allow them to kind of go in some of these varied terrains. I think, I'm not quite sure, I think the other one for tractor.
Good.
So I just real quick, these equipment can be used throughout all our areas, right? Just not.
That one would be,
Canyon.
no, those would be dedicated to Sycamore Canyon using your endowment funds. They will provide, as you said, habitat management for SKR, which RCHCA directly benefits from it. The park benefits from a recreational activities that will be used for basically fixing trails and stuff, which helps, we have interpretive science.
Area.
Yes, it's one of our SKR reserves and we count on that for our recovery efforts. It'll also help to put in fire lines around that reserve, protecting canyon crest communities and stuff like that. So we are recommending for the RCHCA will benefit through the SKR management.
Okay. Seeing no other folks moving for raising their hands to speak online. All right, we're gonna go ahead and take a motion on this. Request action is to approve the endowment funds request by Sycamore Canyon for habitat management equipment in the amount not to exceed $121,486.35. Do we have that motion?
I'll make that motion.
I'll say.
The motion, we got a second. Any discussion of the motion? We'll do a roll call vote.
Corona. Emmett,
Yes.
Lake Elsinore,
Aye.
Menifee. Moreno Valley,
Yes.
Marietta,
Yes.
Harris,
Yes.
Riverside,
Yes.
Temecula,
Yes.
Wildemar,
Yes.
County District 5. And Marietta, how did you vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Alright, that concludes the roll call on this item and it passes unanimously.
Very much for your decorum on that, and then we're going to move forward to item number 7. Report for the general manager. Dr. Kurt Wilson was not able to attend the meeting. Is there anyone that was speaking in his place? No. All right, so we're gonna move on to item number 8. This is an items for future agendas. Are there any requests for items on future agenda topics? Okay. Okay, all right, we'll leave that one alone. All right, so we're gonna go on to item number 9, general announcements. Any board members have any general announcements? And that moves us forward to the next meeting, next regularly scheduled RCHCA Board of Directors meeting is scheduled for Thursday, December 12th, 2024, 11:30 a.m. in WRCOG's office at 3390 University Avenue, Suite 200, Riverside. I want to thank everyone for their decorum, and it is 12:24. We are adjourned.
A good job under 1 hour.
Yeah.
Amen.